they thought I was this knowledge on Torah, and like they wanted to talk to me about their Judaism, and I was like, I have no fucking clue what's going on.
Hello and welcome to Culturally Jewish. Today we have with us Shaina Silver-Baird and Michael Goldlist talking about their new show, Than Kosher.
Mama always wanted me to be a doctor, but I became an artist and that really shocked her. Now I'm interviewing people in the biz, pros and newish, but all of them are artists and they're culturally Jewish.
So, a bit about the two guests. So Shaina Silver-Baird is a Dora Award-winning actor, musician, writer, and songwriter based in Toronto. She's the lead singer of a pop music band called Ghost Caravan. And Michael Goldlist is also Toronto-based. He is a writer, actor, and producer. Together, they created the digital series Than Kosher, which premiered on Highball TV on June 5th. And June 12th, it was now made available for streaming and purchasing. David, how did you like the show? Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about what the show's about?
Yes. First of all, I had a great time watching the show.
Me
Basically,
too.
how it's set up is it's 10-minute clips. It's 10-minute episodes over 7 episodes, I believe. So basically, the show, it follows like a self-proclaimed bad Jew and failing pop star, Viv. When she lands ass backwards into a job as a cantor at her family's synagogue, she's thrown into, a ride of illicit affairs, drug trips, and tense family drama, self-discovery, and some Jewish bops. So they describe the show as like Shiva Baby meets A Star Is Born, if you're familiar with those two shows. And what it does is it combines a lot of modern Jewish wit and Hebrew electric pop.
It was really interesting because when I read that synopsis, I was picturing something very different. Like I thought it was going to be a bit raunchier, a bit more like leaning hard on the comedy, like more of a Broad City style thing. And there was a lot of like emotion and heart. Like I started tearing up in the first episode the minute that she starts singing in the synagogue.
What was it? Yeah. So what was the music why did it tear you up?
I mean, it's something that we didn't get a chance for me to say this in the interview, but I very much like Shaina connect to Judaism very deeply through music. And it was something that when I was not particularly involved over most of my 20s, music was the thing that always brought me to tears and I felt that connection. And I really do think it's kind of like you'll hear what she says about it after. It's this ancestral feeling of like, these are the same tunes and words that my ancestors have sung. And there's something, I'm also a singer, so it's something that really hits deep. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm tearing up. I was like sitting on the train, watching all of these back to back to back. And it kind of hit me. And then the humor comes and the acting was just super great. I thought that they cast it really well. And it was funny to see, do you know David Eisen from the Harold Green Theater?
I know of David Eisen.
So it was just funny to see him as the rabbi. I thought he did a great job, but it's just so funny because I know him as like a theater guy. And I've seen him in lots of other things, but I've never seen him play a rabbi before.
And one other thing that you kind of touched upon was the fact that sometimes with a lot of shows, it can feel very shticky, right? Oh, Judaism, what does it really mean to me? It means nothing. Like Seinfeld-esque, where it's surrounding you, but it's never deep saturated into the show. This show was a bit different. It felt like the Judaism, while Viv is struggling with it's a core element of the show. What does Judaism mean? What is their relationship to temple and family, community, as well as liturgical prayers? So all that, it didn't poo-poo it or eye roll it. It really embraced those two competing ideas together.
Yeah, and she has such a beautiful voice. Like it was lovely to hear her sing. And I love the way that they did it in the show. The minute she starts singing in Hebrew, she's like transported into these other worlds. You can see that she's like
even
so
campy at times
away.
and over the top.
Yeah, I thought that was super fun. So I'm excited for you to hear this interview. It's nice to just chat casually with a bunch of other people in the industry. It was super fun.
Sing it.
Now?
This is an audition to be a cantor.
But I don't want to be a cantor.
Well, Jonah didn't want to be a prophet. But sing the song for your dad. Let's see what the music says.
And then what? I think of my dead dad while I sing and get all emotional and feel a deep hidden connection to Judaism, then agree there must be a God after all and so devote myself to being a cantor? I haven't warmed up.
So I want to hear a bit about your background. So Shaina, I'll start with you. How did you get started in the entertainment industry?
Oh, wow. We're going way back.
Going way back. Just briefly. A little bit of backstory.
Yeah. I mean, well, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with musical theater. So I went to musical theater day camp. That was like my version of camp. And I think we always joke in my family that my first concert was my bat mitzvah because my bat mitzvah coach was a singer. And then I would imitate her, and she was giving me these like covert singing lessons while she was teaching me Torah. And so, it was a small synagogue. I was the only one being bat mitzvah. They just kind of kept giving me everything. So I did the entire 1 hour service, basically myself. And then kind of after that, I was hooked. I started doing plays and musicals in school. And then I did like semi-professional as a teenager. And then I went to theater school. And then worked mostly in theater and like professional music for a while. And this is kind of my first big foray into film. So it's kind of been ever since that bat mitzvah.
And that was all, you grew up in Toronto?
Toronto, yeah.
Okay, cool. And Michael, how about you?
Man, I was one of those obnoxious kids that just liked when everybody looked at them. So, and I have an older cousin, 10 years older than me, who was always in the entertainment business. He went to New York, he went to Juilliard, he was a playwright. He was a writer and producer on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and he recently created the show Julia for HBO Max. His name's Daniel Goldfarb. He's my cousin. I look up to him. Always have my whole life. So I guess I sort of like always saw him doing entertainment and was like, that's the best. So I went to like a performing arts high school, Claude Watson, and then always did plays and stuff. And then trained as an actor and was an actor for a while. Went to New York, got my MFA, worked in New York doing like mostly like Shakespeare and children's theater. Then I moved back to Toronto, and that's when Oh, it was great.
That's like what everyone does. The Shakespeare in the Park, the children's
the TYA touring shows. Yes.
You know, I was like when I first got a gig in a children's show, I was like, I have my MFA. Like, this is beneath me. And then the second I was on stage, I was like, this is the best. Kids are amazing when they love you.
It's really fun.
They love you. And then I moved back to Toronto, and then like was still active, but got more into writing and producing just to make my own stuff, and then slowly transitioned sort of away from acting only because I found it more fulfilling to create things and work with other people. I still would, in theory, do some acting, but it's mostly just now writing and producing.
And then how did you two join up? How did you come together?
Okay, so great story. So like 13 years ago, I wrote a play, and the lead was a 17-year-old woman. And Shaina auditioned for me, and she was like, maybe like kind of the exact opposite of the character, but she gave like this incredible audition. And I was just like, I remember thinking like, she's not right for this play, but I gotta remember Shaina, like she's a real talent, like really, it was incredible. So we were just like Facebook friends. And then.
Yeah. And then I put a post so I was watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I had recently had the experience of the rabbi who did my bat mitzvah kind of like called me up after I graduated theater school and convinced me to be a wedding cantor.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of autobiography.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not Viv. I'm not the character, but that kind of kernel came from my life. And I mean, I told him, Ellie, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't speak Hebrew. I have never read the Torah. I don't go to synagogue. Like, this is not my world. And he was like, it doesn't matter. So I got into all of these hilarious situations where people thought I was a certain thing and I wasn't. Like, they thought I was this knowledge on Torah, and like they wanted to talk to me about their Judaism, and I was like, I have no fucking clue what's going on. So I had these stories, and I watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I felt like this was the kernel of a show. So I just put a post on Facebook that said, hey, who are the Toronto Jewish TV writers? And Michael reached out and said, what's your idea? And I pitched it to him, and he loved it as much as I did, which is half the battle. And so we just kind of on instinct decided to work together. We didn't know each other that well, and we just went for it. And now we've been talking almost every day for what, 4 years?
Yeah, pretty much.
So how many, I'm curious, how many people responded to that post as soon as you said like Jewish TV writers, boom, 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 I can imagine.
A lot. I got a lot of suggestions from other people, but Michael was the only one who reached out personally, and who I kind of had a bit of at least knew, you know what I mean? And I felt like, it felt more like chatting to a friend creative as opposed to me pitching someone above me. And I liked that. I just liked our dynamic. Yeah. And he loved it as much as I did. So
that's really got inspiring. Along. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy that we got along, because like, working together with people can be horrible. It's like it's sort of like an arranged marriage. Like even if you arrange it, like you never know.
So true.
And we just like really every time we got deeper and deeper, and and then when you get some funding, sometimes like there can be a lot of pressure. Although like it's Canadian art, it's not that much pressure, but it's like our careers, it's our entire life's work. Yeah. So the pressure's there, and like I don't know. I mean, Shaina's a really wonderful person to work with, and she's just like really smart, thoughtful. And she'll listen to me and she'll tell me when I'm full of shit, And it just was like, it's really, it was very fortuitous that we ended up together. I also like, by the way, thinking about that, and we haven't talked about this in a while, but when she put that post and I was like, I should reach out. A little part of me was like, what am I reaching out for? Like, it's so ridiculous. I can't like tell someone like I can help them write a show. Like, it's not like I had like a hit show on TV. I was working on a digital series for CBC. So like I knew I'd done some digital series. I'd certainly know how to get some grant money, but like, it's not as if like I'm a
big macher or anything in the industry.
No, not at all.
No.
But I was just like, whatever. You know what? Sometimes you just got to reach out. And I just had a good feeling. I remembered like her audition was really like, it's really special. And she's a special sort of performer, So, I didn't let the chance slide by.
I want to just say a couple things to that. Number one, I feel like that's really inspiring for those who are listening who don't work in the arts. So much of what we do, because David and I are both also actor, writer, creators, is like up to chance, and it's all about how much you put yourself out there, and like that's really brave. You're just posting on Facebook and you kind of hope that someone comes along, because the amount of times that I've thought, maybe I would do a TV series, but I was like, I don't know if I know someone who'd be able to do this. And I feel like that's really affirming to see a success story and to know that it can happen.
But you know what? It's also the other thing too is like, when Shaina came in for that audition, she wasn't right. Many times you could feel, I didn't get that audition. I must suck. I must be terrible. I never heard back. But at the same time, Michael on the other side is thinking, not right for this role, but super interesting, super engaging. Yeah. I want to see them again. And that happens many times in our industry.
Shaina, what were you going to say?
Yeah.
It's so that's like a huge part of it. You just come in and do your thing, and then you'll find the thing where your thing goes sometimes,
Find the thing where
you'll find the thing where your thing goes.
But it's true. I feel like my career took a turn when I started to understand that not getting the role wasn't a failure. Because it really isn't. Like if you do good work and someone remembers you, that's the best thing that can possibly happen. And I agree that like people should just reach out. I have kind of always been that way since theater school. I will just write people.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, I'm the same way. You kind of have to be. You have to be. Nothing's going to happen if you just sit around waiting for your phone to ring.
No, I do not subscribe to that at all. And my auditions get better too when I'm working on other things because it doesn't feel precious. Totally. It's just a thing I'm doing that
There's that sometimes sort of desperation in those auditions where it's like, I really need this job. Please, please, please get me.
Yeah, so then you bend yourself out of shape to try to be what you think is going to be hireable, and you can never do that. Like your talent you can't be talented in the way you're not talented. You have to be talented in the way you're talented, and that's all you can do. So you show up and be like, this is what you get. This is me. This is the product. If you don't like it, pass. If you do, you do. And then you find that just like, then people start seeing you, and then they'll want to work with you when the thing comes where it's like, it has to be this person,
Right. So I want to go back to the show. So you mentioned some anecdotal things from your life about becoming a cantor when you didn't know so much. So that relates a lot to the character of Viv on the show, who's like a self-proclaimed bad Jew and then ends up becoming a cantor at her synagogue. Can you tell me a bit more about what made you decide to tell the story specifically in that way? Because you were saying just before, like, I am not Viv. The show, to me, was so interesting because I read the description and I was like, okay, it's going to be this person who's like a bad Jew and whatever. But the show's so Jewish and like really emotionally Jewish with all the music, which we'll talk about soon. So what is your own Jewish connection now, and how did that inform the decision to tell the story in this way?
It's a really good question. I definitely feel like through this and some other Jewish projects I've done recently, I've become more Jewish. And I don't mean that in a religious sense. I kind of mean it in an identity cultural sense, that I identify more as being Jewish and I emotionally relate to the stories and the music and the experience. And it's interesting you brought up the music because that's one of the core things that Michael and I talked about a lot. where we said, how is it possible that we're these contemporary young Jews who feel so disconnected from the religion, almost antagonistic towards some of the religious aspects a lot of the time, and yet so identify so deeply with being Jewish? And when that Jewish music, when we hear it, when we sing it, it's like I could be brought to tears and I don't know what I'm saying. And then I read a translation and I'm like, these words don't inspire something emotionally in me, but the fact that I'm singing these words and these haunting melodies that my ancestors have been singing for centuries, there's a thing that happens. So it was an interesting tightrope to walk for us, and I think I'm really proud of us for, I feel like, pulling it off at least relatively well, where it's a comedy, but there's also like a deep soulfulness and an emotionality especially in the music, and in a way, in interrogating and challenging Jewish norms. We're kind of being the most Jewish you can possibly be.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, Michael, I'm curious, like, do you agree with that as well, too? What is it about the music, but what is it about Judaism that still has that connection for particularly young Canadian Jews like yourself?
It's a push and a pull. Like, I didn't grow up very religious, although really culturally Jewish. My parents, my dad was president of the synagogue for a while, but no one ever mentioned God in my house. If someone says like God, I'd be like, ew, God. Like, if you translate some of those prayers and those songs into English and you read them, you're like, not really doing it for me. But there's something aesthetically pleasing about Judaism. There's something I like about it that's like, I don't know. It's confusing as to why I give a shit that I'm Jewish. Like, I don't always know exactly why, but it's definitely, there's something about it that I like. And I'm extremely proud to be Jewish. Then there's also a part of me that's like, it's all made up. Like, these are just tribal things that divide people. So there's always like warring sides of my brain. But the one thing is, like, I always am interested in the fact that I'm Jewish and what Judaism is and like what it's been in the 20th century. I'm not particularly rebellious against the religious aspect because I didn't grow up that religious. Like, we didn't have a whole lot of like laws, or certainly my parents were never like, God is watching you. Like, that's like cringy. I could never even imagine sort of level. So it's just interesting. Like, Jewish is just interesting, and it's fascinating, and it's full of all sorts of like, I mean, it's been around for so long. It's had like 3 or 4 completely different iterations. And every iteration is like a little different and a little strange and full of all sorts of like neat stuff. Like, I was recently reading Martin Buber for some reason. Like, I found a book of like Martin Buber's short stories, and they're like these weird, Kabbalistic, odd, like, and I was like, man, these are awesome. Like, this is so cool. There's like a side of, here it is. Okay. So some of religion is so deeply uncool and so like boring, and it's just like a little fascist. And then there's parts of religion that are just like actually really sexy and super interesting.
I think you're the first person on this podcast that said religion can be sexy.
We had to go there for this because we wanted the show to be sexy. So,
but like some of the melodies and the like, first off, Song of Songs, man. That's a whole bit of romantic, like hot poetry,
that's
including
actually
the part where he's like, I wish you were my sister. Very strange.
One of the funniest things I remember my brother was showing me, because there's like every different Siddur has like a different English translation of Song of Songs. And he was like, look at this edition. And it was like very, very overtly sexual. And then the other edition was so cleaned up that it was like super, like nothing to do with sex at all, and was all just like poetry and like about God. And we're like, this is interesting.
Can we go back to the other one? We might pay more attention. Yeah.
Your show has a lot of mixing, as we mentioned, about the traditional liturgical prayers and everything like that. Now, you called it Judeo-pop. Is that a real thing that's happening right now on social media like TikTok?
No.
Maybe it will. We're starting it. We're going to see where it goes. It is a hashtag that our social media managers have started.
Nice.
So everyone put your Judeo-pop on TikTok and Instagram and hashtag Judeo-pop.
Listen.
That is my ad.
Didn't sea shanties become super popular for 2 weeks last year?
And also the random song by like a religious boys choir.
That's what I was thinking.
Not?
This is where I think was your inspiration. It's the Miami boys choir that started singing, and everyone was up in arms about all these yeshiva buchers and these religious kids singing these liturgical songs.
Yeah. Well, because music's the great connector. And if that's I think our show is in there. It's not just Jewish music, just music, real music that comes from somewhere and just has something to say musically is the great connector, and it belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what's so wonderful about, like I went to a jazz fest in New Orleans and I wandered into the gospel tent and I was listening to a kids gospel choir from Louisiana singing about Jesus. I had no connection to it, but like in that moment, you're just like, holy hell, this is incredible. Like
stunning.
Yeah, all the soul.
Yeah, so I mean, I think
So
that's
connected.
like, when I say sexy, it's also something soulful. Like, me and Sharon are both interested in like Jewish soul, and there's a lot of layers on top, and there's a lot of stuff, but I guess we're really interested in the most interesting and soulful parts, and that has a lot to do with music, and also has a lot to do with family and responsibility for each other, which is,
community.
Yeah.
Speaking of family, what I sort of, as I was watching this, I got, this is the plight of the boomer generation, right? We are in this economic situation where so many young Canadian artists have to return home as they're trying to balance their life. So I guess I was curious, is that the only way to survive as an artist in Canada these days? You've got to live with your parents. What do you think, Shaina?
For context, for those who haven't seen the show yet, the main character is like living at home and is a musician who is like not doing so well in her 30s. So continue, Shaina.
Yeah, she's had to last minute move back into her mother's basement, and she's not very happy about it. She's like 30 and like, what am I doing? I don't think it's the only way, but political statement wise, it's pretty close. It's pretty post-COVID hard to make a living as an artist in Canada, and you have to find ways. You have to find other jobs or support from partners in times where you really need to focus on something that isn't paying you a lot, or support from parents. Yeah.
I mean, I have a day job. I have to work.
What's your day job?
In marketing.
Marketing.
Yeah. I'm a associate creative director, which is
hence the dig at marketing people.
Yeah. Having said that, it's sometimes can be pretty fun because at least it's creative.
Great.
But I would say my advice would be, if you can't have the good fortune to come from wealthy parents, which is tricky to do if you don't, like it's hard to sort of reverse engineer.
You just find new
I would
parents.
Strongly. Well, that or just marry someone who's wealthy. That's this is what artists have done for generations.
Lesson.
Also, like the book, like you don't like Leonardo da Vinci wasn't like a self-made man. Don't all these people just have rich patrons like the Medicis or whatever? Like, the arts have always thrived on wealthy people who want to throw money at artists. So like it's just continuing a long-standing tradition of just impressing wealthy people so they can also launder their money and they can get some cultural capital by supporting artists, and like that's the ecosystem, and it has been for like 500 years.
I love that we're just encouraging everyone to become sugar babies. Like, what are we doing on this podcast? But you do have to find creative ways. Like, I also have a side job. My partner and I, he runs a business. I help him with his business. I tour. I've been touring a theater production. I've been working on this. I've had bands. Like I do find though that if you have that like artistic urge, even if you take on other jobs or do other things, it's there, and it kind of drives you almost not against your will, but you can't turn it off.
Yeah.
I find for myself, like I see it everywhere. It's addictive, and it's something that like needs to come out of me.
Yeah.
And no matter what I do in my life, I think I'll find a way to be artistic. And
which sometimes
creative.
I find that artists are a bit shameful to mention. They sort of say, oh, like if you're not working on the next show, you're not making it. And there's almost this feeling of embarrassment, like, to talk about your day job. We all have day jobs. We all have to do multiple juggling acts constantly. And sometimes there's this maybe unspoken rule. It's like, well, you don't really want to bring up those day jobs, or you don't want to talk about where you're actually earning your dough from, because it's considered less than. You're not a pure artist.
Or the thing that drives me nuts too is when artists don't call themselves artists, and they're like, no, like we'll be at a party or something and they'll ask them, oh, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm a waiter. And I'm like, no, this person's an actor. Like, you're doing waitering for money. Like, don't sell yourself short.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing, because we're not going to change our society to the extreme tomorrow. Like, it would be great if we could all make a complete living as an artist, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. So I think the thing that we need to do right away is take away the stigma around the Joe job or the second job, because we all have them and it's necessary. And I think the best thing I got from a coach, he said, Joe jobs are amazing because they allow you the freedom to do your art. Like, they are your supports, so be thankful for them, and then just go do the thing you want to do at the same time.
And like, if I'm not mistaken, like, didn't Van Gogh have to do portraits of rich people around Amsterdam, wherever the hell he's from? Like, I mean, I don't think I think it's pretty rare that you find artists that can do just one thing. And you know what? It's also very rare that people exclusively, even if they're making all their money from art, can do only that art that they love. And we've seen a lot of actors that do Marvel movies. Maybe they love to do it, but like, there's always
their dream.
Everyone compromises. Nobody is uncompromising.
Yeah.
Nobody. And actually, the compromise is important because, like, that's how you learn your craft. That's how you learn your skill. Like, all the writers that we love who created shows were staff writers on other shows. Maybe they didn't love those shows. Like, maybe they found those jobs really hard to do. And,
or they were staff writers on like commercials or copywriters for a while. Like, everyone's, sometimes you just got to do a job.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had my MFA in acting, and then my first bunch of gigs when I was back in Toronto was a McDonald's bagel commercial, a Tim Hortons bagel commercial. Like, I think,
why not?
Give me a commercial. I would
yeah,
love
I mean,
that.
that's like,
commercial
that's
money
just, that's life.
No complaints.
That's life.
So on the show, you kind of bring in some of this conversation, especially in the early part of the series. Viv is talking to her parents, and you can tell that the mom's not really thrilled about the fact that she's not working. What was your own experience, Shaina, with your parents going into the arts? Were they supportive?
Oh man, I feel like my mother is the complete opposite of Viv's mother. Like, not opposite in the love that's underneath it all, but I was like, Michael, we can't use my relationship because there's no drama there. Like,
wow, you're lucky.
My relationship with I'm very lucky. My mother is the best. She's a therapist, but like doesn't therapize me. It's just, she's one of those people who you walk into a room with her and you're like, you end up telling her everything. Like, she knew when I started drinking. She knew everything, like, to a limit, and she's really supportive. So I didn't have all that much trouble. My mom, I remember going to my mother in grade 12 and being all nervous to tell her that I wanted to go to acting school because all of my friends told me, you should be so nervous, she'll hate you for it.
Oh, no.
And I told her, and she like laughed. She was like, what took you so long to figure that out?
Wow,
Her only stipulation was get a degree. So she's like, you can go to an acting conservatory, just go to one at a university. So you have a degree in case you want to then go do something else, the degree will help you.
Right.
But sometimes I wonder, like, another kernel that's in the show that is related to my life, although in a very different way, is that my father also passed when I was a preteen. And in the wake of that, also my mother being who she was, we became very close. And I didn't go through so much of the rebel stage because I was like, hold on to the parent I've got left. And a really good friend of mine pointed out to me that maybe I'm acting out my rebellion through Viv.
Oh, interesting.
And that I'm getting to do it later in life.
Viv takes the exact opposite. I mean, in some of the ways, like, you know, when people are like, is Viv based on Shaina? It's like, well, some of the circumstances are based on Shaina's circumstances, but it's also like Viv makes the opposite choice at every time. She runs away from her bat mitzvah. She runs away from her mother after her father dies. She starts building sort of resentment and anger towards Judy's. Like, it's got, like, you know, it's, so we knew how to write stuff because we had the circumstances in front of us, and then it was just like, but Viv's wired different.
Shaina, was that a bit of a challenge then to bring that truth into the script with your father passing away? Was that at all helpful? How did it feel?
I didn't find it challenging. I find bringing things like that into my work actually like quite cathartic. It's partly, I think, why I became an artist, and not that it was not that I felt like I was telling my story, but every character I become is partly me and partly not me, right? It's my body, it's my brain, it's my voice. And I find it was nice to be able to, there's a lot of dead fathers in art. Like, if you look at every Disney movie, there's a dead dad, right? But it was nice to be able to tell that story myself and with Michael. For example, this scene, I find a lot, especially in subpar storytelling, when people reveal that their parent has died, and maybe this is true for some people, so I shouldn't judge. It's like a very emotional revealing, and that's not my experience. Like as soon as I lost him, I would kind of punch people in the face with it and just be like, my dad's dead, period. And Viv is very that way.
Yeah.
So that kind of comes from me. Like, I will tell people very kind of straight that it's a fact of my life. And if we get into the deep emotional story, but it was nice to be able to tell that with some genuine honesty around the emotional side of it, where it wasn't overly schmaltzy. And it was just like, it felt real, even though Viv wasn't me. We were trying to tell it in a real way.
Yeah. And so what was that collaboration like? I'm super curious to hear. So Shaina, you had this idea, you brought it to Michael, and then how did you work together to kind of tell what you had in your head? And then I'm sure, Michael, you brought your own background and ideas into it. Walk us through that a little bit.
We failed constantly. Like, we just would put something together and be like, meh, then put it together again and go, meh, put it together again and go, put it together. Like, I mean, how many iterations of the show, how many different names for the characters, how many different, like, at one point her name was...
Yeah, we ripped it apart and, like, put it back together.
So how long was that process like, from, let's say, first draft or even first idea to production?
Oh my God.
First idea, I think, was
years?
like 3 years.
Yeah.
And then first draft was maybe 2.
But
okay.
But and it changed a lot. Like, it went.
Lot.
But what didn't change, I guess, is just like we did just the feel. Like, you know, we just knew we knew where we wanted to, like, be. We knew the ballpark of what we wanted to play with: sacred, profane, Judaism, not Judaism, singing. Like, we had this, and then it just would change, and it just kept helping find itself. And then we started getting better and better. And then, you know, when we worked on the series, we worked with an amazing story editor, Kat Sandler, who asked so many incredible questions, and we started changing things and working on backstory and rewriting. It's like that's the hardest part, and it takes the time it takes. Like, yeah, and it just keeps changing and growing.
And how did you end up on this network, Highball? How did that come to be? Like, you went and pitched it, or let's let the listeners in on a bit of the behind the scenes of how TV shows get made.
The nitty gritty.
Yeah. I mean, we pitched a few places, and our producers, Emily and Laura at Film Coop, were amazing. They had a relationship with them as well. And that relationship was relatively easy. I hate to pull back the curtain on something that wasn't that difficult, but we kind of sent them the Bible, and they're artists as well. It's an artist-run company, and they were like, we love it. It's a really cool concept. And they were kind of on from the beginning before we even got funding. So and that's one of the things that creators need to know, is that for, like, IPF, they'll fund these short form digital grants. You need a place for it to go before you apply. So they have to kind of take a chance on you, which they did. And we're very thankful for that. And we're still kind of, you know, we just started working with a distributor, and it's kind of becoming bigger than we ever really imagined it would. So we're very excited that they kind of took a chance on us at the beginning, and now that it's done and people can see that it has a standard of quality to it, that other people are coming on board and becoming part of the team.
That's awesome. And I noticed the show had, to me, it felt like there wasn't much censored. Like, I know sometimes you do a show that has, like, very culturally specific themes, and they're like, oh, let's make this more universal. And then there's this whole scene where you're doing, like, Hebrew karaoke, and there's, like, no English written on the bottom of the song. And I was curious if you, like, maybe to me it seemed uncensored, but, like, did you have any issues when you were working with the network where they were like, oh, this is too Jewish?
Can you Jew it down a bit, maybe?
Well, no, this is the good thing about a digital series. Like, I mean, this is not on broadcast television. So when you do that, you get carte blanche, because you can kind of do whatever you want. Nobody said anything to us about anything.
That's awesome.
Really. We were, there was no oversight, no, like, none. I mean, we could have done anything we wanted, probably, if it didn't run amok against, like, any sort of law. I mean, right? Like nobody weighed in. Like our funders, like when CMF gives money to digital series, they just pitch them and then they give it to you. I mean, like, they don't read draft, like you send them work, but they don't read drafts and say, like, no, this is like, I mean, you're sort of on your own. In that sense, it's incredible. It's just like completely artist led. It's also really scary because like you're just
totally, because you're like
your own.
Jumping off a cliff.
Yeah, but no, I have to say, like, and I did a previous show for CBC Gem. And, you know, they saw the drafts, they were there on set sometimes, and they nixed one joke in an entire series. And they didn't even nix it. They said, like, this one's, like, kind of really mean. Like, do you need it? And we were like, no, we don't need it. And that was it. So, like, you know, that's the one thing, like, we're not working on primetime broadcast TV. And so there's, like, there's just, you can really stretch your wings and do what you want. And also now I think that we're in this, like, period of prestige TV and peak TV. People really understand that, like, that's what people are interested in, shows that go there. I don't know, like, we're not going to be making the Big Bang Theory. And so no one's going to say, no, in fact, it's the opposite. The more specific, the more weird, the more, like, Jewish, the more like, niche, the better.
So talking about very niche, there are some very niche things in this show. I'm really curious, who came up with the idea of a luau-themed Shiva?
Oh, man, I don't know. That was definitely it was in a meeting with Michael and I and Kat Sandler, and I'm not sure. There were a lot of things that came out of the thing about writing with people and like writing rooms is that sometimes everyone's just throwing stuff at the wall and like you walk out not quite knowing who came up with it.
Yeah, there's some
Do you
lines.
remember?
No, the best part about a collaboration is when something happens and you feel like you did it even when you didn't, or you did it together. Like, I feel like it was my idea, but that's because I like it so much.
It might have been yours. It might have been one of those things where we were like, okay, what would make this Shiva the most exciting and the weirdest? And we were like all throwing out ideas, and then we had a list and we were like, this was the best.
No, but it's also like, you know, and this is a funny thing about writing, because like I think the genesis of that was we were talking about who was Morty, the guy who died, right? And so then we were talking about him and trying to come up with a bit of a character for him, and that lends itself to what type of Shiva we'd have. So it's like, is the tiki themed or the luau themed Shiva the idea, or was the idea like who someone asks who was he and how does that affect his Shiva? So like even in a writer's room, if you come up with the answer, the person who asks the question sometimes is the one who should take the gold star, and that's why it's collaborative. And that's why you have to do it together as a team.
I just remembered. Just remembered where it came from. At first, we were saying that his funeral was untimely and had co-opted his birthday party, so they had messed up all of the decorations for his birthday party, and then somehow we decided luau was better.
Yeah, that was it. It was like his 65th birthday, and they were just it was gonna say happy birthday, and then we were thinking about it says like happy Shiva on it. Yeah, so that's just the idea that we knew it was gonna be like. It was going to be weird. But then we also talked about that he's like, we were just talking about character, and actually I know a little vaguely who he's based on. I definitely won't say, but there's somebody I know who I just thought like, and it's a certain type of sort of boomer privileged Jew who would just like have been to Hawaii a lot and have an affinity for it. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So before we wrap it up, just super fun, quick last question. Who are some of your Jewish inspirations as artists, whether it's a writer, an actor, a creator? Take a moment.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, definitely Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and everyone who worked on that was kind of inspiring to me and inspiring to this in a kind of direct Genesis way, where I saw, oh, someone's making a Jewish comedy that isn't Larry David and also isn't about the Holocaust, you know? And that kind of made me feel like, oh my God, it's possible and people will watch it and like it and there's an audience for this. I mean, I also love, this is horrible, I am blanking on her name, but the showrunner who did Unorthodox and Transatlantic, what is her name? Anyways, I will look it up, but she is a huge inspiration to me, which is funny to say because now I can't remember her name. But
is it Shira Huss?
No, she's the actor.
Oh, no, showrunner. She's the actor who I also love, but the woman who wrote it.
Well, while you're looking for that, Michael, why don't you jump in?
I listened to a whole lot of Mel Brooks as a kid, like tons.
Nice.
Me and my family can probably quote the entire 2013-year-old man off by heart, start to finish. Certain flavor of Jewish humor that I really like there. Boy, I don't know. It's kind of a tricky question. Go ahead, Shane. Who is it?
Anna Winger. That's her name.
Cool.
Anna Winger.
David was there. He was or you were there. I think you're gonna say Anna Wintour. It was pretty close.
I almost said Anna Wintour, and I was like, no, that's the Vogue person. Different person.
I guess also one of the things I've thought about a bit. I've read a fair amount of Philip Roth, who I think is an amazing author, obviously pretty celebrated, even if seems like he was kind of a bit of a fucked up guy, but his books are
many writers are
really, yeah. He was really specific, which is like 90% of his books, if not 100% of his books, were just about like Jews from Weehawken, New Jersey, where he was from, and like he could just return to it over and over again. It's really specific, and like I think I went through a period where I was just like, oh, I hate that I was born in Toronto, and like this is the most boring city, and like Canada's so boring. Like if I was like an Irish guy from Belfast, if I was like like a Jew in the 50s in New York when it was like exciting, and then at some point you're like, well, I'm not, so I could never ever do that. You just have to write what you know. So I guess like I was inspired by that in Philip Roth, which is like, I've seen someone critique it and be like, oh my god, this guy just keeps on writing about Jews from New Jersey. And it's like, yep, he's not
what he knows.
Yeah, it's kind of what it is.
Shaina, Michael, I want to thank you both for coming on to Culturally Jewish. We hope nothing but the best for your show. It was a fantastic ride on contemporary Judaism mixing in with music. So all the best, and thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to chat with you guys.
Thank you so much, guys.
So David, you are in Victoria, BC. Tell me more about that.
I just landed yesterday right here because I'm doing a show for the next 6 weeks at a theater company called Blue Bridge Theater, and the show is called The Guardsman. So that was the big selling point. The director called me up and said, hey, do you want to be in Victoria for the summer? And I said, sign me up.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Is this someone you've worked with before?
It's never someone I've worked with before, and this is kind of how it works in the industry. He was looking for a lead actor, and he started asking around a bunch of actors that he knew and trusted and worked with in the past, and one of them said, you want David Sklar?
Wow.
So then he gave me a call. I put a self-tape together, and then within a few days, he said, yeah, you're hired, and start learning your lines, because it's a beast of a script. It's quite long, and I never stop talking. So
oh my God, one of those.
We'll see how it goes. I'm a little nervous about my lines, so I'm gonna rehearse and practice right after this, and get it up to speed. But Alana, you also have some very exciting stuff. I know you just finished your program, right? The Jam program at the Siegel Center.
Yeah,
oh, no.
it's kind of bittersweet. Though like fun things to come for sure. I've been doing this Jewish arts mentorship program at the Siegel Center here in Montreal. And yesterday we did our presentation. So we all showed, it was more like a process-oriented presentation. Most people didn't have a finished script. Some people were way further along. Some people were still more in the early stages. But it was so funny because I didn't remember the last time that I'd done a formal presentation. Like I had a PowerPoint. It felt like I was like in high school because I was showing I'll get into it another time, but it's a whole show that's honoring the life of my grandmother, who was very, very important in like Jewish global activism at the time. So I have all these pictures from archives that I had pulled and video clips with interviews that I'd done and radio clips. And so, yeah, it was very nerve-wracking because it's a solo show. So it was just literally me up there for the entire presentation for my part, explaining my show and then also like doing monologues. And yeah, but I got really good feedback. And a lot of people told me that I made them cry, which like sounds sadistic. But to me, that means that I touched them. And so that made me feel really validated about the work that I'm doing. And a lot of people kept saying like, keep going. This is such a worthwhile project. So that was really inspiring.
So where is your project right now? Is it like early ideas, concept draft, first draft, final production?
So my project is very research heavy. So I spent, the Jam program was January to June, and I spent most of it doing research. And I'm not done, but towards like as the program was nearing an end, I was working with my mentor, and she was like, why don't you start actually doing some writing? Because I'd been doing some more movement exploration, like playing with music, playing with movement, some dance stuff. And I had been doing a lot of journaling because that's going to be an element of the show. It's kind of like documentary theater mixed in with more movement music stuff. So I need to finish interviewing people, but I think my next step is applying for funding, which, you know, ironically, we were just talking about that in the interview. I need to apply for grants or residencies because I'm spending a lot of time on it, and I'm at the point in my career where I don't want to be unpaid for all that work. So that's kind of the next step, and then I can start taking all the research and actually writing the script properly. Like I have all these subhead like titles of, and this is where I'm going to do a scene about this, and then here's like a little thing I wrote, and a lot of it is just very early writing with a ton of research to back it. If that makes sense.
Well, best of luck for everything, and I hope we can maybe one day see a final production of it.
Yeah, and you just had the reading of your show, I think I saw. How did that go?
I did. I had two different readings. So I had one because this play that I wrote won an award for best new script for a theater company in Calgary. Thank you. So we did a reading of it, and that theater is more like very spiritual based and has a Christian element to it, which I was very nervous and excited to see how they would take a very Jewish script. They actually laughed a lot. They had a great time. I was surprised by how funny they found it. Huh. Contrast that with the week after when I set it up at my temple, it was a lot more tense, I would say.
No way! That's so funny. That's so interesting.
Yeah, because these ideas... It was so interesting to see the dichotomy, the difference between how these audiences react to one that is just giggles, to another that is like, everyone was a bit on edge. But my rabbi came, the president of the synagogue showed up. They both had really fabulous and wonderful things to say about the script. I got some great feedback from some people. One father in particular, he said, you managed to keep my 16-year-old daughter engaged for the whole 90 minutes of your play on the ride from Calgary back to Cochrane where they live. So I took that as a big victory for the script.
Wow. And so what's on your radar these days? I know you're very busy with rehearsals, but anything that you're curious about or that you would suggest that people go see maybe on the West Coast since you're tapped into that area?
Well, you know, I've just arrived, so I don't know really what is happening on the West Coast, but this is a show I've been watching recently. It's called Rough Diamonds. Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't.
So Rough Diamonds, when I was traveling in Europe and I stopped in Antwerp for a bit, everyone was talking about this show. And it's a Belgian TV series set in the Orthodox community, the Orthodox Jewish diamond dealing community in Antwerp. It's on Netflix right now. And basically the synopsis is you have this character named Noah who travels home to Antwerp after the suicide of his younger brother Yankee. And upon returning, he sort of reconnects with his Haredi community that he abandoned. And he's also trying to rescue his family's diamond trading business from the pressures of, be it organized crime and a local prosecutor. So it's a great show on Netflix. What was super impressive is everyone is speaking multiple languages, whether it's English,
fun.
Flemish, French, Yiddish, all at the same time. So I'm having a very good time watching that show.
Oh, cool.
And what about you?
What I want to plug is a show that I'm going to go see actually Wednesday night. Games I Don't Want to Play by Michigas Theater. Michelle Soicher is a local artist who used to live in Montreal, now lives in Toronto. She abandoned us. And she teamed
As many do.
She teamed up with Joseph Glazer. And actually, Michelle developed this show through the same mentorship program that I just completed at the Seagull. She was in the first year ever of their program. And now they were talking about it a bit yesterday at the presentation. They've been working on it for 5 years. And this is kind of like the pilot version of where it's at right now. They did a version of it over Zoom, I think, in the pandemic. But it's not done. They're going to keep developing it and growing it. But the show Games I Don't Want to Play is, from what I understand, it's kind of interactive. There's 4 players that they say are put to the ultimate test, navigating their identities as contemporary Jews. The stakes are high. The rules change. They will balance their identities like spinning plates and contort into whichever Jew is needed to survive. Expect laughs, excitement, and a bunch of anxiety. So on Wednesday, they have a special night, which Michelle was saying that they were inspired by blackout nights, which is when Black artists will put on a show for only like the Black community to be able to like experience it with people who kind of get it. So they're doing a night called Minion Night so for Jews to go see the show all together. So I'm going to go to that.
So you're going to the Jew Out performance?
Yeah, I'm going to the Jew Out. I'm really curious to see what it's all about. It's at the Montreal Fringe Festival, and it plays from June 12th to 18th. So be sure to check it out if you're in the area.
Culturally Jewish is hosted by me, David Sklar, and
Ilana Zakon.
We're produced and edited by Michael Freeman, and our theme music is by Sarah Siegel-Lazar. We're a member of the CJN Podcast Network. If you like this episode, go ahead and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us out a lot. To support our work and everything the CJN does, visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a monthly donation and receive a charitable tax receipt. Thank you for listening.